Are you looking for an escape from manufactured truth wrapped in selfish agenda? Don't you just want to have a real and raw conversation, all masks and rules aside? That's what you're getting here at Titan Evolution Podcast. Get rid of all the nonsense information and discuss everything under the sun without filters. Listen to real stories of real people who will put your current perspectives to the test, guide you on living the life you truly want, and see everything free from judgment and pretenses. Time to get rid of those unhealthy environments and let your authentic self shine. Here are your hosts, Travis Johnson and Carol Carpenter.
Welcome back to the podcast. Oh, nice job, Travis. That's quite the mean scout you got going on. I am your co-host, Carol Carpenter, and this is Travis Johnson, the one that was making the scowling face in the beginning. And we have as our special guest on the podcast today, Michael Ravenwood. Welcome. And Michael is a performance artist that has traveled all over the world with his company, SkyFire Arts, while wearing a protective suit that becomes electrified. God, can I speak today?
Nope.
Electrified by a Tesla coil, wielding 10-foot long arcs of electricity. That must be spectacular. He's a speaker, meditation and dance instructor, and aids others in personal empowerment. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much, Carol. Glad to be here.
You know, I saw a video of Michael doing his thing, and I gotta say, it's outrageous. It's absolutely bananas. And based on the look on Michael's face, he gets that a lot. But I want to know, like, obviously, you wouldn't do it if it wasn't safe, or maybe you get electrified the whole time. I have no idea.
Well, we like to say that we do extremely dangerous things safely. And, there's a whole reason why we're doing it. We're risking our lives for a purpose that we feel like is worth it. And it's to draw attention to ecological awareness and renewable energy. There is essentially like a history of using this technique. Nikola Tesla himself used to electrify himself during the science tours that he would do. And that was to draw attention to the technologies that he hoped would benefit every living human. Like he wanted the whole world to benefit from his inventions. And he would, just wear cork shoes and not even use a suit. He would just do like a really low voltage thing and turn down the lights, and people would see the aura of electrical, arcs coming off of him. And they would think he was a freaking magician because, in the 1900s, that was just like, what, and then once he had their attention, right, he would, then tell them about his inventions. And he actually predicted that there would be an object that would one day fit in your pocket that would have all the world's knowledge in it. And everybody at that time thought he was totally insane. They were like, yeah, right. Like library in my pocket. Like, how does that work? And now, they've proven right. But anyway, so he used to do that to promote, his technologies. And we want to promote the idea that we're all connected. Ecology, biology, quantum physics have all demonstrated that everything is interconnected. And so we want to help people understand that that's been scientifically proven and begin to act like that's true, because you can sort of know it's true, but then not act like it's true. And we still end up in deep,
Deep shit. You can see it.
Oh yeah, this is illicit rating. We cuss all the fucking time. You go ahead and say whatever you want. Yeah. There's definitely a difference between knowing it in your head and knowing it in your heart. Like I can read a book and know it in my head, but until I actually start doing things, like I don't really know it in my heart. So that's really cool. I wanted to have you on the show, and I know the amazing things you do, but I want to know, what do you think about yourself that makes you a Titan?
What makes me a Titan? Wow. Well, I will say that my understanding of the nature of motivation is that, because motivation is really how all human energy gets conducted, right? Like what creates motivation? Well, it's your values. If you believe that something is valuable, you're going to do a hell of a lot to go after it and get it, right? So where do our values come from? Well, they come from the stories that we believe. And so I've had some incredibly powerful stories in my life that I believed and that I used as a guidepost for how I live my life. And so, part of what makes me a Titan, I guess, is the stories that I believe. I feel like my mom, she passed about 17 years ago now. She was just an epic human being. And so I think that, a lot of what my mom taught me has helped me become everything that I am. Let's see, my friend, like, honestly, my friends, my family, the people who have come to support me in doing what I'm doing, like, I could never have done what I do without the help of a lot of people who know a lot of stuff that I don't, so the support of people and the faith of people around me, I could probably go on, but
well, so you talked about other people, right? But what that quality really comes down to is you're a person that's willing to take guidance, to accept feedback, and accepting help from their friends. There's so many people that we talk to every day that they give and give and give and give and give, but it's not an open loop system. It's closed loop. They only give, they never receive. And they don't realize that so many of the problems that they create in their own life is not because they're givers, but because they're unwilling to allow others to bless them. And you fully embrace that. And I salute you, sir, on your qualities of you being a Titan, willing to actually receive blessings from others.
You have to be willing for both giving and receiving. And I think it's a gift both ways. And for people that aren't willing to receive, I don't think that you can learn more. I mean, you can't gain more knowledge if you don't receive it.
Yeah, amen to that.
I'm learning that's a trauma response, is that they have to be self-sufficient, that no one can help them because so many people have let them down. And it's a trauma response. They're still in it, and they don't realize that they're still operating that way.
Yeah, well, and I think it opens you up to vulnerability, and vulnerability is a quality not a lot of people want to portray or show because it's a weakness. And I think that's
but it's different. Being vulnerable and open is different than actually being weak.
Absolutely. But people see it as the same, and that's the reason why they don't accept help, or they're unwilling to ask for it.
Yeah. Well, I just think of, like, when you say that, and I'm fully on board with you, I just think of, like, how dumb is the average person, right? And then realize there's 3.5 billion people dumber than that.
Yeah, I think that that this is actually one of the major sort of paradigm shifts going on in our culture right now, is the understanding of what might be called the power of the feminine. I think that there are a lot of even feminists that don't recognize what the feminine power really means. And I actually, in my workshops, I use this funny example. What if you had meat grinders all around you, just whirring and spinning and chewing? Is that the time to be decisive and act? No, it's the time to be very still and very silent and wait and observe. And you might find that at a certain point, all these whirling meat grinders like open up, and then there's a spot where you could pass through, and then they come back, and you're like, aha. So there is a moment, and then you wait, and you maybe chamber your legs and get ready. And then the moment that opens up again, you leap through, and it might look like the leap is what saved you. But in fact, it was the willingness to observe and wait and be patient. And a lot of people, say, oh, the feminine is the passive one as opposed to the masculine, which is active, and therefore the masculine is the powerful one and the feminine is the weak one. But in fact, they're misunderstanding the nature of what power is, and that that the ability to be what might be referred to as passive is just as important, if not more so in certain cases, than the ability to be active at the right moment.
Well, have you ever seen the movies with the samurais? And samurais they're warriors, right? They're as masculine as can be. But you know what they taught the samurais to do? In acts of connecting with more of their feminine side, they would make them sit down and make little wonton dumplings, right? Because it requires patience. Because in both, you have to be a warrior, but you also have to learn that patience, because it requires both to win wars.
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have to be connected to the masculine and the feminine. And I don't know what nationality you are, Michael, but you know, we can get into that, but like I'm Chinese. So, you know, everything is a yin and a yang, male and female. And so if you took the meridian down the middle of your body, one half is male, the other half is female. It's the joining of the two in one body.
Or yeah,
Shush. I'm looking at Travis and he's got this smirk on his face. He's gonna be a smart ass right now.
I just picture like one boob and one ball, and I'm like, I'm not okay with that.
Well, that's why, Travis, I actually have this way. I refer to it as like, if it was to be divided, it would be like, okay, if this is male and this is female, you know, a male should have both a masculine and a feminine, you know, aspect, and a female should have a masculine and a feminine aspect. And it tends to be that women have more of a feminine aspect and men have more of a masculine aspect, but that doesn't necessarily play all the way across. There are definitely very feminine men and very masculine women. And so for each individual, whether they are born male or female, to have both the masculine and the feminine energy and be able to, put those together in harmony, that's really what makes you, powerful and ultimately happy in your life, because you're capable of doing the things you need to do.
Right. It's accepting it too, because we're all different in the degrees we have them, right? And I think people in our society, men are supposed to be manly men, right? And women are supposed to be really feminine. And who said that? Whoever put that out there? I mean, you can be whatever you want to be. If you want to be like a masculine female, be a freaking masculine female. If you want to be a more feminine male, fucking be a more feminine male. There is no right or wrong. Everybody is an individual. Why can't we celebrate that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, the right or wrong thing, because I view that as one of the most, sort of primary paradoxes of life, is that there is no right and wrong, and there is definitely a right and a wrong. Meaning, like, like in terms of like, for like what you said, that there is no right and wrong way to be true to yourself. Like if you are a more, masculine woman, then there is nothing wrong with that. And then you look at like, okay, things like, and I'll take another paradox. Let's say you're in 1942 and a Nazi is at your door and they ask you if your neighbor is a Jew, and they are a Jew. The best thing you can do, the right thing to do, is to lie. And normally we think of lying as being like a bad thing, right? And so there is that weird like, oh, okay, this strange universe of which we are a part, call it whatever you want, God or reality or just the universe, but it's tricksy. It doesn't let you just kind of hold on to like, well, lying is bad, and I'm just going to hold on to this truth and say lying is bad all the time. But then you run into that situation like, well, wait a minute. Actually, if I don't lie in this situation, some horrible consequences are happening. So it's just a very interesting, the whole right and wrong thing. I always view that as kind of an interesting point.
There is no such thing as true black and white. I mean, let's be honest. There are always circumstances that'll make us sway, right?
I tell you, honesty is the best policy. I told my son this last. Honesty is the best policy, and it's a lot easier to be honest if you're not being a douchebag.
I hope your son is of the age where
he's
how old's your son?
No, I'm kidding. He's in high school. I wouldn't do that to a 3-year-old. 3-year-old wouldn't remember anyway. If he was 4, I'd be in trouble. But no, he's a teenager.
Great parenting. Come on, Travis. Great parenting.
I tell you, of all the things that I've done well, parenting is probably in the bottom 5.
There we go. Here it comes. So what nationality are you, Michael?
So I was born in Tokyo, Japan, but I am half Vietnamese. And so, I've actually got some, cultural interest in both realms. I studied ninjutsu for a while and read a bunch of books about the ninjas, and I'm tremendously inspired by both them and the samurai. I've read a few books, the Hagakure and Book of 5 Rings and whatnot, the samurai codes. And that's tremendously fascinating to me as a culture. You know, and then there's all the samurai. When you said, have you seen samurai movies? I'm like, yes, I have seen the samurai movie. And then you know, and then, you know, it also in the Vietnamese you know, realm, my mom introduced me to quite a bit of that culture. And you know, the whole thing, I wrote my wedding ceremony actually, and in the wedding ceremony I included elements which were from my wife's culture, which is, you know, Indian, East Indian, and then also from you know, Vietnamese culture. And they have the whole thing about the dragon and the phoenix, and how that represents the masculine and the feminine coming together in harmony. And that's what a marriage ultimately you hope is. Yeah, so that's my cultural background, you know. Oh, and my dad is Caucasian, you know, Irish, French, Scottish, and German.
Holy crap, you are quite the international person all in one.
That's a very nice way to say what I was thinking. That's
that I'm a mutt.
No, like it's like, so like my heritage, like my paternal grandparents, he is 100% Norwegian, she's 100% Danish. So my dad is half Norwegian, half Danish, and my mom. So we're from Minnesota, right? So there's only two things to do in the winter, and one of them snowmobiling, if you know what I mean. So her side, her side is like English, Irish. I want to say a little bit of Spanish, and then I've heard, I don't have any proof, so anyone that's listening is going to get our panties in a bunch. I heard that I have some Native American, but I can't prove anything. If you look at all the guys in my family, well, most of them are 6 foot, blonde haired, blue eyed, giant ears, big noses, and then I look like my mom.
No way.
Oh yeah, I don't look like anything like any of the men in my family. Yeah, all of it.
God.
I met my uncle and he's like, "Who the hell are you?" I was like, "I'm Dave's kid." He's like, "No, you're not." Because like literally, you could take my brother, my dad, my uncle Earl, my grandfather Alvin, and it looks just like a time-lapse photo of the same person. And then here I am, dark hair, dark eyes, ears tucked where they're supposed to be, dead sexy nose, and like eyes that don't quit. But I'm not blonde haired or blue eyed, so
Isn't that funny? Oh
yeah.
Wow.
Genetics. Who knew?
Yeah. Did you do a 23andMe or any of those, like, you know, type of, I don't know, genetic kind of testing things to find out what your heritage is or nationality or whatever?
Not yet.
No?
I've been thinking about it. The military, when I was still in the Navy, they came out with a policy that said we couldn't do it, and a lot of people did it anyway.
Wait,
And the reason
why?
and the reason is because one of the legal releases when you get those things done is they own rights to your DNA.
What?
And I don't need any stupid company owning rights to my DNA.
No way. I didn't know that.
Well,
Oh.
Yeah, that would probably be very profitable for them. You know, I mean, if they were giving people this service of that, you know, they could actually make more money probably from using your DNA to do experiments or whatever than they could from receiving money from you to do the actual test.
I don't need some lab somewhere having my DNA replicating me as a person committing crimes and leaving my DNA at the scene. I know that's crazy, right? I know that's craziness, but so you know what is even more crazy? The fact that we have all the knowledge on Earth in a phone in our pocket. Right? So
right.
So who's to say what they will or will not do? And I don't, if someone's listening to this and like, Travis, that's not accurate. Maybe it's not as accurate as what the actual text says, but either way, I'm a little nervous.
Yeah. My brother went and did it, and then he came back. I never did it, but he did it, and he came back with all these different tests, and he goes, you know, our family's been lying to us. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, we are not 100% Chinese. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's what everybody told us, you know. And then he goes, like, there's a certain percentage that's Japanese, there's this weird percentage of us being Dutch. And I started laughing and go, well, they fucking somehow got to Taiwan, because not only did they get there, you know, but all the women in our family have streaks of like auburn hair. And when we were little, everybody be like, oh, did you dye your hair? I'm like, no. You know, so we laugh about it now, but you know, possibility, right? And what was the other thing I was going to say? This is mommy brain, because since I had children,
I'm not in charge of you. Turns out,
it's funny. If I don't write it down now, I can't even repeat it because my brain just goes one direction, and then whatever was going to come out in the other direction is gone.
I tell you, I don't do anything anymore. It's just whatever my calendar says I'm doing is what I go do. And so like all right, here, like anyone listening to this, like if you hack into my accounts and you put something on my calendar, I'll just start doing it. Halfway through doing it, be like, how'd this get on my calendar? Like I won't even know. I just, whatever the thing pops up, whatever it says I go do, because there ain't a chance in hell. I remember, I got so many damn things. Like Carol, you own like what, 19 companies? Michael, you do all sorts of like I ain't got time to remember like what to do. So it pops up. I'm in Oklahoma City. I get a 30-minute heads up because from anywhere in town, I can essentially get anywhere else in town. Right. So if I'm out across town, 30 minutes. If I'm out across town doing something and the little thing pops up, I'm like, oh shit, I gotta go home. I've got enough time to make it home and flip on the camera and do what. Hey, I'm glad to see you today. I've been here all day.
Yeah. You got drips of sweat coming down your face, like holy shit, I made it on time.
Yeah, it's like like it popped up this morning. It's like haircut. It's like, well, I guess I'm getting a haircut, and I'm getting a haircut. I'm like, why was I getting a haircut today? Oh yeah, I've got this thing later tonight. I got to be looking all sexified for. So yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what else you do besides this, SkyFire Arts.
So, well, SkyFire Academy is, where I teach workshops about personal empowerment and flow arts. So in essence, I got my degree in psychology many years ago while studying quantum physics and comparative religions and spirituality and mind-body medicine. I took this like class long ago called Self, Health, and Culture, talking all about how, the placebo effect is this really interesting thing because we kind of like account for it in every single scientific study about medicines of any kind. And we kind of like remove the effect that our mind has on our body to like do these healing effects, but we kind of don't explore like, but wait, what was the part about our mind has the power to do most of the healing that any medicine actually does, And so, in that class, they talked about that, and it always did strike me as strange, like, oh, this is arguably the most proven scientific fact is that our minds can affect our bodies when we're fooled by, being given the sugar pill or whatever. And it always occurred to me like, well, what if we could just not have to fool ourselves? What if we could just intentionally go like, I'm going to have less pain. And then you just have less pain, or I'm going to, activate my immune system now. And then your immune system just kicks in. And so there's actually a guy named Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's like doing a bunch of workshops all over the world, teaching people about how to do this now. And, whereas I'm not quite where he's at, I have been doing, since, being in college, I've been doing yoga. And since even younger than that, I've been doing meditation. Since I was about 10, I started doing meditation in karate classes. And so anyway, I teach, meditation, breath work, personal empowerment, visualization. It's so wild how just imagining that you're experiencing something, like your body to some degree can't tell the difference between you're imagining that something's going on and it's actually happening to you. So you're going on. Yeah. So your body will actually have these physiological effects just from imagining things. So that's one of the ways to use the placebo effect or whatever, is just to like get in a really calm state and then visualize as if things are happening. So anyway, visualization and whatnot. So I teach through SkyFire Academy, those kinds of things. And then also what are called flow arts. And they're essentially, movement practices which empower us to enter flow states. And there was a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who long ago was, kind of the father of positive psychology. Travis is like, oh yeah, I know him. So, he essentially, identified, oh, there's this flow state that people get in which they're the most effective and, lo and behold, the most happy that they are at any point in their life. And I start out all my classes, I'm like, okay, welcome everyone. Like, who wants to be more effective at everything you do? Okay, all right, everybody. Okay, and how many people want to be happier, like every day. Want to be happier? Yeah, it sounds good, right? Well, there's actually all these things that are scientifically proven to get you there, and I'm happy to share some of them with you. And then you know, flow arts specifically is actually usually referring to spinning instruments, or object manipulation is another way to put it, or whatever. But you know, in essence, I spin chains and swords and staves to wield the lightning bolts that we produce with the Tesla coil and you know, fire and whatnot. And so I teach people how to do that, but not necessarily because people want to be fire spinners one day or lightning dancers one day. I teach them that because it kind of informs you about the masculine and the feminine. So like we were talking about earlier. So for example, like when you're spinning a staff, there's a moment where like it's spinning and you have to at that moment guide it, or else you're going to like hit yourself, right? You have to guide it to the other side of your body. But then there's a moment where it's in exactly the right position, traveling in exactly the right direction. So you shouldn't do anything at that moment. You need to allow it to continue to move until the moment comes where it's like, oh, this is the moment. Guide, allow, guide, allow, guide, allow. And that's a way to kind of like begin to get your body and your mind into the mode of, oh, I understand that life is not just about trying as hard as I can or making it happen. It's about, you know, definitely trying. There's definitely effort involved, but
just not forcing it, because we force things, right? And I think that's the difference with that wonderful flow state is you're not forcing anything to happen. It's naturally going to happen, but at a certain point you have to guide it also to get it to where it needs to be, right? So yeah, I love that we're talking about you know, masculine, feminine energy, because when you earlier alluded to the fact we're coming into this more feminine age, I love it. It's been a long time since we've shifted towards it, but then I think there's a danger in shifting too much as well. You know, just like anything in excess is bad. In moderation, it's good.
I would say that there is a time for excess. There is definitely a time for excess, but it is very rare. Like, okay, there's this piece of property that some friends of mine bought in Oregon, and on it is this like 40-foot tall statue of Padmasambhava, this amazing Tibetan saint, you know, / mythological character. And the entire sort of tradition of the monastery that's on that property, or that was on that monastery, roots back to a particular event where there was a monk who was part of this, you know, order where they took a vow of you know, nonviolence. But then there came to be this like absolute tyrant, this person who was just a horrifying plague upon his people, just like ruinous, you know. And this monk eventually kind of came to the epiphany of like, and so this tyrant though would have these monks as servants because they had taken a vow of nonviolence, and so he would like, you know, allow them, because none of them would ever hurt him, you know. And the monk eventually kind of like grokked, like, oh, actually the most peace and compassion and love and beauty and truth that I can bring into this world can only happen if I actually assassinate this guy. And so the monk like broke his vow, but only just this once. Only just this once, I'm going to break my vow, and then the rest of my life, you know, whatever. And so that's how that whole order kind of like, and the entirety of Tibet apparently like totally transformed at that time. So it's interesting about, you know, excess and moderation, but I agree with you that 99% moderation, 1% excess.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that is being followed, but at restaurants in the US, it's 99% excess.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So where are you located? You said you had this academy.
Yeah, I'm in Encinitas, and actually it isn't like a physical location at this time because we don't have to have physical locations anymore to have institutions or whatever.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. So it kind of travels to events. I have them at local, you know, dance studios, you know, cirque schools, you know, at a park. You know, I do it at my home sometimes. You know, we just have these classes wherever, you know, like I said, I travel to events. So, you know, that's where it is. I'm an
I
Encinitas.
just picture someone spinning fire in my living room and then it going terribly wrong. Like,
I got 2 questions for you. How good's your ventilation and how high are your ceilings?
Neither is good enough for what we're talking about today.
How much insurance do you have?
That's another backup question. Yeah. Actually, no. Actually, I have insurance, so you're good. You're good.
Either way, as long as I get paid, I'm gonna be happy with the result here. So, like, were you always this person who we're seeing right now? Is this the culmination of your lifetime? Tell us some things about Michael that sucked along the way.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'll hit that up. So, I was put into school a year early. Intellectually, apparently I was ready, but emotionally, psychologically, they didn't really like test for that stuff back then. So they're like, oh yeah, he can do it. Put him in kindergarten at 4 years old, And it was kind of late. Yeah, there you go. Right. So so it wasn't the best for me because I was a year younger than everyone else. So I was a year smaller than everyone. And I'm like kind of a thin person, So I'm going to get maybe in trouble for saying this, but this is the reality of my situation is whenever sports were done and there was a team being picked, it was me and the fat kid. That was we were the last ones picked as the hefty, not very athletic person and me, and that was just, it kind of sucked, and I even got to a point where one of the things that I'm most ashamed of in my life is there was this one point where there was somebody who was actually kind of a friend of mine in high school and but he had kind of a funny accent and whatever. And then somebody found his folder on the ground, whatever. And I started making fun of his accent. And then ended up, he was there, and I realized later on that I was like, why did I do that? Like what? And I realized that I was so desperate myself for some sort of attention, yeah, and some sort of validation that I was okay with just making fun of this kid. I didn't know he was there. It wasn't like I just did it to his face or whatever, but still that sucks, and that was not my most glorious. That was among my weakest and most pathetic moments. And I had more more weak and pathetic moments so another kind of yeah, so
well, before we jump on,
okay,
did you realize it in that moment that you were being shitty, or was that realized many years later?
Yeah, I realized that I was shitty in the moment, but and it's like I kept making fun of him. I was kind of like, man, and then later, it was really later upon reflection that I got deeper about it, because I had this thing where whenever I would think about the fact that I had done something and made a person feel a certain way or think a certain way, I would get super, my stomach would hurt. I would just super, a lot of anxiety. And it really came from the fact that I didn't experience any love from my parents. Now, later on in my life, I recognized that my parents did in fact love me, but the way that they showed their love for me, I did not recognize, meaning to me, there was always something more I could have done. There was always something more I should have done. There's always something more I yet could do, and so it was always out of my reach. There was I like to call it the carrot and the whip. The carrot is always kind of out in front of me trying to, and then the whip, if I'd lag too far behind, Carol, I can see you nodding. This is a very Asian thing as well. The whole driving us, yeah. And then my dad was a New England Irish Catholic, kind of by raising. So there was a lot of
there
the
was
guilt.
An actual whip.
There was actually also that. There was also the beatings,
yeah. So when you got beat, I don't know, my family used bamboo. So we would get those really thin bamboo and they would tie them together.
Yeah.
We really got spanked, seriously whipped. So
yeah,
every lash was 10. So I would get it across the back of my legs, my butt, the whole thing. It was extremely painful.
Yeah, there was definitely, that, and sometimes it would just come out of nowhere like a smack or something, and then sometimes it would be go to your room and we're going to come and spank you later. So I got to like sit there and just with my shame and my
Oh my
impending doom.
God,
Yeah,
that's
it's
the worst.
pretty messed up, right? Yeah. But like the bottom line is that, you know, for me, it was just this, like, I didn't expect, I had plenty of food, clothing, and shelter, but I didn't have that sense of love or acceptance. So, you know, I talk about this in my Google Talk or whatever, that I just got to a place that was so dark that like I considered doing some really like the worst kind of things that you hear about people doing. Like I was like rolling those around in my head, like, I wonder about
what are those things?
what if I did these or what if I did those? You know, just like you using you know, the most kind of, yeah, just read, you know, American Psycho or whatever, and you know, just, yeah, I don't want to go into it here. I'll just say like there's some really bad things that people do to each other in this world, and I was so deprived of love that like I was like, well, what could they do to me? Like, what if I do all these horrible things? Like, what's going to happen? It couldn't get any worse. Like to me, it couldn't get any worse than
Internally you were feeling that suffering, so it
yeah.
was just like, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it was just
and
miserable.
it sucks, but it now that you're older and you're probably a parent too, right?
Yeah.
And you sit and you go, you know what? There's this realization they were only doing the best they could in the circumstances they were in with the limited knowledge that they had.
Yeah.
So if you can accept that and you mature, you know, as you mature, that's how you kind of get to that place.
Yeah.
If you can accept that, then you can forgive all of that, you know.
And you know what? Yeah, you know what? That's actually, I would have to say, like the greatest gift of having been to that place in my life, because I can actually have compassion for people who do horrible things. Like, and this has been the basis of one of my most profound realizations of life, which is the difference between judgment and discernment. Because everybody's born with certain qualities and characteristics. Everybody learns to express those or not in given ways through the course of their life. And everybody is doing the thing that they think is the right thing to do, or else they wouldn't be doing that. And in that way, we're all the same. And the more that you judge another person, the more you create an atmosphere of judgment in your mind, where eventually and inevitably, when you cross your own lines, that all that judgment gets turned to you, and it leads people, including myself in the past and sometimes probably today, to go into rationalization and denial. Oh no, I actually didn't do that thing. Or, oh, I did that thing, but I did it for a good reason, or this reason or that reason over there. If instead we can just recognize, oh, I, like everybody else, am just doing my best, you know, then you can get a level of like moving past judgment, which is basically saying, I am this way or somebody is this way and they're bad for it, versus discernment, like I am this way and that is just what it is. And you have to have discernment, because you don't invite somebody who is a known child molester into your home to spend the night when you got kids. Like that is just not, you know, you got to show that kind of discernment. But at the same time, you don't have to judge. You can even be like, God, it must be horrible to be that person. That must be really miserable. And, you know, what would I do in that situation? Would I kill myself? Would I, you know, like what options does that person have? And so you can just kind of be in the space of, well, I have to discern, but I don't have to judge. And it frees you. Like I have been freed of so much tension in my life by just not having judgments for people or ever speaking ill of any human being. I can just skip all that. And it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I love that you use discernment as the other word. When I in the past, people talked about judging, and the quote in the Bible comes up, judge not lest you be judged. And we talked about this before on the show. And my response was like, you judge everything all the time. I judge the speed of the car coming towards me, if it's safe for me to pull out in the traffic. But really what I meant to say, based on what you're saying now, is that I use my discernment and my experience to understand whether that is or is not a good idea. So I really appreciate you bringing the D word onto the show today, so I can up level and upscale the things that I'm doing. I mean, intellectually, obviously, we're still making D jokes on the show. So, you know, it's not like I'm mature, if you want to say it that way. But
Michael, don't you think besides that, I mean, yeah, you don't want to judge people like that, but you also have to realize people make choices. And if people made the choice to be a child molester, given their circumstances and however haunted they were, right? Didn't they make that choice? Right. And so maybe that's the reason they're haunted. So I don't know. There's a really fine line. Like when we start talking about, they're not really that different from us. Well, the difference is the choice that was made.
Yeah. And strikes to the whole, like, all right, where do you draw the line? Because we all make choices that are not necessarily the best choices. And of course, on this level, there's a whole scale of consequence, right? Like, oh, I made a choice to kind of roll that stop sign or whatever, which might have endangered somebody.
Anyway, that's just a California roll. Just tell
yeah. Versus, I even though a person has these kinds of impulses that they choose to go forward with it, and to, that's where we, as people who recognize, all right, we're all in this same, if we were literally them, if we were born with their qualities and characteristics, we had learned through our experience to behave the way that they're behaving, we would think that what they're doing, we would think that we were doing the right thing. And then that's all they're doing. So once you understand that that is the reality of our situation, then it's like, all right, I don't have to, even if I have to, for example, to protect my family, I would slay without hesitation, reservation, or doubt a person who is threatening us. But I don't feel like I don't feel like I have to judge the person either. I can actually, like in ninjutsu, one of the things they share with us is about killing with compassion. It's like, I'm sorry that life has put us into this circumstance where, you're on the other side of this war from me, and your daimyo is trying to, assault and take over our whole land and destroy all of our people. And so sorry, but this is what I need to do, to protect my loved ones. And and that you can in fact kill, but without having to hate or judge, which is what actually hate and judge actually within us creates a tension that I don't think that I need it, even to be a protector of my family.
I like that. I like that a lot. I like that you use killing with compassion. It kind of gives a new definition to that song, Killing Me Softly. Next time I hear that song, I'm going to picture two ninjas on opposing sides saying, I'm doing this for my family.
Wait a second. No. You can't envision two ninjas. You'd never see them.
Did you see it was like oh my god, this was like a meme before it was memes. I saw it said the 10th annual ninja parade, and it's just a picture of an empty street.
That's awesome. I love that. That's classic. Yeah, the first three things that they taught me was, one, how to properly walk and run. And why would you teach someone how to properly walk and run as the first thing in ninjutsu? Well, as a beginner, just starting out, you don't know any martial arts really, you better learn how to run if you're going to survive, because everyone's better than you, so you got, the first thing is to learn how to run. The second thing is how to fall and how to roll. Why? Because they're going to kick the crap out of you for the next however long you can make it through the training, and so when they throw you to the ground, you got to learn how to not, damage yourself. And then the third one was unarmed sword evasion, where the other person has a sword and you don't have a sword, and they try and whack you, and you've got to use one of several different, depending on what position they're trying to strike you from, one of several different, evasion techniques. And it's like, well, hopefully you don't end up in that situation ever. But if you do, that's one of the most difficult that you can ever be in. And so you want the longest, you want to start practicing that right away so that you have that.
Doesn't get whacked over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, just for those keeping score at home, I want to just remind you of the list: how to walk and run, how to fall, and then unarmed sword evasion. That escalated quickly.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between an MP3, an MP4, and an MP5. Do you guys know what the difference is?
No.
No, actually.
An MP3 is a audio file that's just music or talking. An MP4 includes video. An MP5 is a SOCOM SEAL like assault weapon that they used to shoot. So MP3, like I see a picture of an MP3 and an MP4 and an MP5. You see the gun and you're like, well, that escalated quickly. Like,
yeah. That's hilarious.
So I always ask our guests, what is something about you that, let's just say, most people wouldn't know that would be interesting if they did?
Yeah, don't come up with some boring shit.
Yeah, well, we've had some really good ones too. It has led us down the rabbit hole.
Well, yeah, Jessica Muse was talking about aliens and ghost hunting and shit.
Oh yeah, it was fun.
Well, that most people wouldn't know about me. That would be it. I kind of talk about everything that's interesting. I think the only things I keep to myself are the boring stuff. But
we appreciate that.
Yeah. No, really, like I'm trying to think of like what is the you know. Well, I can tell you. I mean, I can tell you the moment that defined the whole rest of my life.
Let's have it.
Okay, all right. So I was on a bus. Oh my God, this is the perfect moment. Okay, I can share this part of the story. So I don't normally share this part of the story because it's kind of like, God, should I share this? I think I should.
Yes,
I think
share it. So, just come on.
Girl talk. I'll regret it later. I could edit it out, but you signed a waiver, so
I think that you so we're not gonna edit it out. We're definitely not gonna edit it out. Okay. So I was on a bus and I was riding into school. I was going to College of the Redwoods at the time up in Humboldt County. And I was rubbing my face early in the morning. I was trying to wake myself up. And something reminded me that I had made love that morning. Something, just kind of,
fragrant?
In my senses, something. Yes. And something just, and then at first I was like, what is that? And then I was like, oh yeah. I made love this morning, and then I looked out the window and something like I had the warm, comforted feeling about like how beautiful that was. And I was looking out at the giant redwood trees, swaying in the wind, and something about the rocking of the bus and the swaying of the trees. And all of a sudden, boom, I was the bus and the people on the bus. I was the road, the earth, the trees and the earth, the wind and the trees. And then I was back in my body. And 3 distinct things happened out of that experience. One, I realized that every moment of a mortal life is tinged with just a hint of fear that something outside of us is going to hurt us, or fear that something we have is going to be taken away. But in that moment, I recognized viscerally, like through an experience, not through some intellectual concept, I realized that that's only half the story. We are independent, discrete beings, but we are also intimately connected to every point in time and space. We are connected to everything. We are everything, or there is only one being here, and it's us. And so I just realized like, oh, there is nothing to fear. Like I am the thing that is both giving life to me and eventually destroying me, And so all of a sudden, all fear just fell like a curtain dropped. And what replaced it was this radiant bliss, like as if I was penetrating and being penetrated by every point in time and space. And eventually I studied quantum physics and holographic theory. And I'm like, oh, that is actually what's happening. Yeah. And so that radiant bliss became like an anchor point for me for the rest of my life of like, oh, this is what it is to be in total acceptance and oneness with life. And then the second thing that happened is I went from being a rabid atheist to being somebody who you literally could not convince that there is not a God. Because previously, like words are just a noise we make, right? When I say the word God, we could have literally just made that noise mean anything. And, if it meant a vessel in which soda is kept, there's millions of aluminum gods all over the place, waiting to be recycled. But, if you use that word to refer to an old man in the sky waiting to punish me for my sins and throw me in a lake of fire forever, I still don't believe in that concept, right? But in that moment, I experienced everything as me, and I was like, oh, this is God. Like that whole idea of punishment and judgment and jealousy.
Like it's an individual or entity of some type that went away. It was this whole oneness.
This oneness, this being of which I am a part, And so I basically came to equate the word God with reality. And so no one could ever convince me that there isn't a God, because you might as well convince me that we're not talking here on the Zoom or whatever. Like, it's a no-brainer for me. I've just redefined that word. And when I talk to a lot of people about that, they're like, oh, okay. Like, I can see that. And, but I still don't like the word God, because a lot has been done in the name of God, which is not to be,
yes.
Loved or respected. So anyway, but then that was another shift for me though. And that like was a big shift. So first of all, I got to experience, total primordial bliss. Amazing. Another thing, I came to become, a believer in the word God because I redefined it. And then the third thing that happened for me is that I realized that like 99% of human culture would look different if people had that realization. Like, people would not be warring. People would not be like, the only competition that would happen would be friendly competition. Like, yeah, let's see who can get there first. Oh, you did it first. Oh, awesome. Good for you. Like that kind of competition, not like, I'm going to stomp you. It's like, no, literally that person is you. So like for me, the idea of hurting another person is similar to like hitting myself in the face, and to me, like the ultimate like kind of edge of that is what I talked about earlier in terms of defending myself. What I think is actually happening when if somebody were to come to me like that, it would be like God asking me, do you love yourself and your loved ones enough to protect yourself in this moment? Even though this is another aspect of you, do you really can you really summon that courage? And so anyway, that will to transmit that experience to as many people as I could, the will that I have to do that came from that moment. And that's what, SkyFire Arts is about. That's what SkyFire Academy is about. Like, that's what my whole life is about, is trying to share that experience. And the closest thing that I've come to, that you could just like plug and play or whatever, is the use of plant medicines. And I think that they are, tremendously valuable and have brought so much healing and grace to so many people's lives. And I really, I honor the place that has had in my life. But what I'm emphasizing now is more of the integration practices that people can use, where those inspirations can actually take root in their lives and create change. So anyway, I don't know if it's a, thing that people wouldn't know about me, but that's like the most
story. It really is. And before I say my next thing, I want to say how beautiful that is, because when I write notes the whole time I'm doing these interviews, and if you don't take the notes into context or take notes like in their entirety, like shorthand, like if you read them and you read them out of context, it looks like it says, I got penetrated on a bus and that's what changed my life. Is what you said, right? Is what you said, but the story is so much more beautiful than what I wrote. You know what I mean?
Hilarious.
Oh my God.
Yeah, or God, even better, God penetrated me on a bus and that changed my life or whatever. Yeah. That's great.
This podcast went somewhere
I hope this was meaningful for all you listening, and also hilarious and tickled your inner teenager, and you're like, butts or whatever.
Well, we were talking about, being able to be feminine, even if you're a man. So, this is going in theme to some degree with the previous conversation.
Go with the flow, accepting all aspects of yourself.
So I do want to talk about plant medicine. I am a product of the DARE age, and we're told drugs are bad. And over my lifetime, I believe that for many, many years. And until my neighbor, who got injured in combat, smoked a little weed every night before he goes to bed, and he was able to, kind of convince me. This is only within the last few years. He's like, look, man. He had this display. He doesn't speak to people. He had this display where he has this enormous Ziploc bag full of pills. He's like, look, man, I'm with you. I was just like you not too long ago. And he lifts up this enormous bag of pills. He's like, this is how many pills I would take every week. Or I can smoke 2 joints throughout the week. He smokes like a half or a third, kind of depending on the day. And I get the same amount of relief from this as I do from this enormous bag of shit.
That's insane.
And
yeah.
so like that conversation got me to really open my eyes to some of the different things that are available and exist. Because growing up in the dare age and then joining the military, like this stuff doesn't exist for you. You don't get the chance to do that sort of thing. Even I think the Native American service members can't go back and do like peyote on their vacation. Like you can't do that stuff. And then I've been noticing in the last few years, I've got friends, especially with PTSD and all those things, that they're exploring and practicing with plant medicine and going on these journeys. And I know we talked in person when I got to visit you live in real people area at a restaurant. Could hardly believe it. I got to see people again. And we were talking about ayahuasca and some different things. And I would really love to talk about what that stuff is, what it can do, like how is it valuable? How can you get a hold of some of that stuff? I know we're in a different kind of drug age. I don't have to go to the corner and be like, you got the thing. And then he says, $50, little man, put that shit in my hand. Like a totally different scenario for getting all those different things. What does that look like?
Well, I do have to say that, in effect, it is still not a legal thing for me to, for example, share where it can be acquired and all that kind of thing. But there are people who are legally holding plant medicine ceremonies in other countries as like retreats and things like that. And I, can share with you folks like a link off of, I'm going to have to figure out like what link that is, so I can share with you a link that you could associate with this podcast later on, where that would, be the best place that could happen. But I will go freely into the other kind of aspects of it, because I feel like, like I said, I want to honor the fact that it has had such a profound transformative, impact on my life, and offer to people that, it may be something to explore, especially if you have a lot of trauma. Not if you're certain kinds of things. I don't want to get into it in very deeply in a certain way, because I'm not actually like a
physician
a curandero, nor am I a physician. That's right. So I'm like, doing all of the appropriate legal backpedaling here before, and then all the caveats. I got all the, I do all the, yeah.
I'm not a lawyer, but if I was, this is what I would say.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna say that, like, that I'm not, making any suggestions to anybody about what they do for their mental health. I'm not making any medical suggestions, and it has had a profound transformative, effect on my life to use plant medicines. And
okay, so can you give us an example of like how, because you keep repeating it had a profound effect on you,
right?
But
right. So
there's nothing being said about what, maybe one example as to what that profound effect was and how you took that insight and made something tangible come from it.
I can give you 50, but I'll start with one. So so I have had the the honor of being brought into a couple of indigenous peoples' churches, and one of them in particular, you stay up all night and you pray, and you always pray for a certain cause. There is no going to church on Sundays just for the sake of going to church. There's always something very specific that brings everyone together. And there's a person who is a sponsor, who is the person who pays for the things. There's a person who, there are different officers of the church who hold different roles within the space. And it is very interesting how being kind of tested in that way, like staying up all night long to pray for a certain thing, is not easy, and it will test your concentration, and it will test your endurance. And one of the really profound things that it will do when it's putting you up against yourself is it will show you the ways that you are thinking about things. Now, one could argue that that would happen even if you just sat up all night and stared at a fire anyway. But I can tell you that, in this particular, spiritual tradition, there are just things that come to you, like I kept seeing myself somehow. I kept coming back around to this, like, imagining that I was receiving accolades and that I was receiving like props, you know, or whatever, in the way that we say it these days, you know, receiving people telling me how wonderful I am or whatever. And at a certain point, I noticed that it was a thing that was bringing me away from the prayer like several times in the night. And I got to reflect, and it allowed me to kind of step back and say, why is this the thing that is distracting me? Why am I wanting to imagine this? And what came to me was what might be obvious to anybody who studies psychology, is that I had an unmet need. I had an unmet need for some form of validation from the people around me. And, you know, I wanted to experience that. And so I was kind of drumming that up in my own head, or hoping for that, or wishing for that. And so being able to recognize that that was an unmet need that I had an impact in a number of different ways. One, I recognized, well, I better learn to give myself the kinds of validation that I'm looking for from other people, or else I'm just going to keep having to chase it. I'm going to keep needing it from other people. I'm going to need to recognize what I need to do that. And you know, it came to me over more years. You know, this was just the insight, right? And this is what I mean by the integration, is like, for example, journaling that insight, and then like having that in your head as you're going through your day, and like continuing to journal what it is that you're going through, and using that reflection to guide you. And what eventually came to me is that you can't buy self-respect. You can't buy it. You earn self-respect. And the only way you earn self-respect is by choosing to do something difficult and then doing it. And so like being dragged along kicking and screaming, and then being able to do that thing eventually, that gives you some level of validation or self-respect, because you can think to yourself, wow, at least I was able to do that. But it doesn't have the same impact as choosing, like accepting what I refer to in the academy as a quest. Every human being needs a quest. If they have a quest, then they're putting themselves up against something. They're challenging themselves in some way, shape, or form. And people want to be part of a quest, not just on their own. People want to be part of a community that all have at least some similar value. You don't have to have every similar value, but you have some enough in common where you feel like all your purposes are aligned, and you're all moving toward the same goal for the same purpose together, and you're going through it together. And you're, you know, so these are the ways that, you know, in my mind, in my life, I have like been able to attain a certain level of self-respect, which I believe that a lot of people are looking for today, you know, and that came to some degree out of that insight that I had in the medicine journey. You know, other insights include like the ways that I'm afraid, you know, like we all fear things. It's what primarily is holding us back from the full realization of our potential, right? Like most of what like is holding us back is our mindset, our concept of who we are or what we're capable of. And because, you know, just believing that you can do something doesn't make it like automatically that you can do it, but opens that door, right? Because if you don't believe you can do it, you won't even try. You're not even going to do anything. You immediately like shut the door, right? But if you believe that it's true, then, you know, you can open it up. And what usually holds us back from believing that it's true is our fears. If you look at like, oh, actually, look, there's all these other people in the world that had a tougher life than I did growing up. And some of them have done a lot more than I have with my life. How can it be that I am incapable of doing, you know, whatever it is? And so it just, you know, anyway, I've recognized the kinds of fears that I have and been able to laugh at them. I've been able to like, I've been able to like look at my life with this beginner's mindset. Like, oh, I'm the fool. I am a fool. And my life is one big joke. And one time I had this on a messenger, I had this realization like, oh, what if instead of like trying to prove myself to everybody and trying to prove myself to myself, what if I just said, no, I'm going to take the low ground and just say, I'm a fool and my life is one big joke. and just like lower the bar to where I realize like I am always going to be the fool to something. Like there's always going to be something that I don't get. And if I can just accept and embrace that fully, suddenly it actually lifts a weight and empowers me in a way that like all these other people are playing the game of trying to be better and do better and be whatever. I'm out of that game. I'm just stepped right out of that game. And I'm like laughing at the whole thing, including myself. And life is so much better.
You can be a spectator, right? You don't have to be a participant anymore. Now you can spectate from a different perspective. Just be like, hey, that doesn't look so good. Yeah, that was funny as hell, you know. Like you get to do that. So let me ask you then also, is there ever because I know somebody that takes these journeys often, right? They go and keep doing ayahuasca or they do peyote journeys often. I don't think he's ever going to reach a point where he's going to be happy. He isn't. I don't think he is happy, which is why he keeps doing it. So do you ever think at a certain point it is no longer helpful?
Absolutely. I feel like there is a period of integration, which is the healthiest to take place. Like I can't say like, because maybe after years of doing that, suddenly they'll wake up and they'll just not do that anymore. And so maybe all those years were just them figuring it out or whatever. So I can't really say like that's the right thing or the wrong thing in this case. But I will say that there is like between the right and the wrong, whatever, there's an optimal. And I believe that the optimal use of plant medicines is very judicious, not only in the dosage, not taking so much that your mind's being completely blown open, but then also not taking too little where you're just kind of going, oh, well, that was cool, but it's like you got to take the right dosage and taking it in the right kind of like rhythm. And in fact, it is rather kind of amazing and magical. And I'd love to talk about magical experiences a little bit later because I've had some real zingers in my life. But it's magical how like at the time when it's good to have a journey, like it will just kind of come up or like someone will invite you to or whatever. It's just this very interesting,
it's
flow.
Not coincidental ever.
Right. In that case, that's right. Because for example, the amount of marijuana I smoke a week could fit on half of my pinky fingernail. I smoke like basically 1 to 2 hits of marijuana every week. And it actually takes me for a journey when I do it because I do so little of it. But when I do it, then it's like, whoa, it really opens and I get super creative. I get all kinds of amazing ideas. It's just, it's incredible.
And part of your brain. And I know that's the reason why they do these plant-based drugs is it taps a different part of your brain. And they've actually scientifically shown that. So yeah, I agree with that. But then there's a certain point where you're just like, okay, are you just doing it to fill a void? Right? You keep doing these things just to fill a void, but you never really are facing the consequences.
Well, let's talk about addiction for a second then, because that filling of the void is I think what you're talking about. And it's the point at which, plant medicine does not become or is not useful. And it's, to me, having human needs that are unmet leaves a sense of emptiness. When you say I'm happy, another word for that is I'm fulfilled, right? It's the sense of feeling fulfilled. You're not empty or you don't have like a hole inside. But when you haven't got your needs met, there is a hole inside. And the issue with addiction to me, and there's a lot of different dimensions. Gabor Mate is an amazing, doctor that has talked more about, the addiction and whatnot than I can cover here. But I'll just say that, his work is amazing. And trauma is involved. But really addiction to me, in the present moment, really relates to unmet human needs. And what is unfortunate for a lot of people is that in school, we don't learn what the human needs are, even though we've kind of scientifically proven it now with a lot of psychological studies. Like these are the things that people really, and physiological, obviously you've got, your basic, food, clothing, shelter, these kind of things. But the need for self-respect, like I was mentioning earlier, the need for at least some validation of other people. Now, people vary in that. Some people can gain almost all of their validation from themselves. Other people sort of need it more from other people. But like there is And there's dangers to both. There's dangers to both leaning too far in each direction, right? But like there's certain emotional needs, the need to feel connected, all these things. And what can happen, and then also the physiological needs for touch. We talk about the physical, like food, clothing, shelter, but what about getting hugs or making love or things like that? Those are human needs that we have that if we're not getting them met somehow, we're going to feel like we're not really getting out of life what is supposed to happen for us. And so
you're not connected with other people, other human beings. You don't feel that connection. There's a separation.
Yeah. And so addiction is basically a defense mechanism where we're trying to numb ourselves or cover up the feelings of that emptiness inside us, because either we don't know what it is that we need and we can't get what we need because we don't know what it is, or we're unwilling to do, well, we know what it is, but we're unwilling to do what it takes
fear
to get what we need.
And it all cycles back to fear. I mean, the truth is a lot of our problems have that as the source, right? Is fear.
I remember seeing a shirt a number of years ago. It said hugs, not drugs. And it sounds like what you're saying is hugs and drugs.
Wait a minute. Hold the phone. I will say that I heard an interesting study. There was an interesting study that showed the incidence of cancer and alcohol. And apparently, if you have no drinks a day versus if you have 1 or 2 drinks or whatever, you actually have a little less cancer. And then you have more if you have like 2, 3, 4 drinks a day, 5 drinks a day. So actually having a few drinks a day is, tends to be that people have less cancer if they at least have something in their life that they use to relax. Now, I'm not saying that it has to come from that. It could come from meditation or breath work, which is what I like to do. I don't really drink. Occasionally I'll have one if somebody's having a birthday or if there's a real celebration. But for me, the way that I get those needs met for relaxation and stuff is from other techniques. But if you're a person who loves a cocktail every once in a while and you keep it at that level and you get hugs, then you will probably have less cancer than a person who is not drinking at all,
I noticed that you didn't go through your standard legal drug. You said that. So
I already hit that.
Take it from Michael. He's saying exactly 1 cocktail a week and hugs. You get.
It's my formula.
You're cancer free. That's
oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! I'm just picturing on Twitter someone being so mad at what we just said. Like, I had a friend drank all the time, cancer out the wazoo. You guys are terrible. I can just see this.
If you're angry, have a cocktail and a hug.
Okay, we're getting off the rails and we're getting close to the end of the show here. So, Michael, you talked about all this great stuff, and we love having you. What kind of piece of advice would you have for someone that's struggling? And then what is the one place you want us to go and have people connect with you after the show?
Wow, one piece of advice. I would say it really boils down to, appreciating what it is that you already have in your life, because you could take all the things that exist in the world and you could put half of beautiful things on one half of a newspaper and all the wicked things in the other half of the newspaper. And if you take your face and you just zoom it close to this newspaper on this side, you're going to be seeing the truth. You're going to be seeing things that actually exist, but you're warping your sense of what exists. And that's what the news tends to do to people. You're warping your experience of life into something, and that is wholly negative. Same is true, actually, if you focus really closely over here, you're going to think, oh, everything's peachy keen. I don't need to change a thing. Everything's wonderful, whatever. But what tends to happen, particularly these days, is people tend to be like, the world is just going off the rails and it's insane. And so to me, a regular practice, just remembering what it is that you already have to be grateful for, that is the first step towards a balanced perspective. And then the second, once you achieve a state where you've really accepted, you know what, for all its warts and, horrible things, like the world still has beauty and still has wonder in it. And it actually, my life is, has things to be grateful for. Then when you're in that state, you can like maybe start to imagine like, and what else would I like? Not like I need to have this thing or else terrible stuff's going to happen. It's like trying to manifest things or trying to like get things out of that state is going to kind of like put that state as a seed in the thing that you get, if you want to get really esoteric or whatever. And if you're really in a state of like, wow, my life's already great, and use inspiration to be like, and this would also be nice. And that would really, really be awesome. I love that. Yeah, that sounds, oh yeah, what about that? That really excites me. That's like, I'm motivated. I'm filled with energy and inspired to do that. And then take a little while to completely let go of all your goals and all your plans and just sit in utter silence and stillness and allow your consciousness, allow your awareness. So this is like a 3-part suggestion, right? The gratitude, the intention, and the stillness or meditation. Because there's a practice called Tantra. And in Tantra, they talk about how if you just keep pleasuring yourself and pleasuring yourself and pleasuring yourself, like, you hardly even feel like, we all know the bowl of ice cream, right? Like we eat the bowl of ice cream, the first 5-7 bites are like the most exquisite thing we've ever had. And the next 10-15 bites, they're really good. But by the end of the bowl of ice cream, aren't you kind of just like, it's a big bowl of ice cream, aren't you kind of just like shoveling it in there, trying to get done with it? Why is that? Like, what's the difference? It's because of our perception. It doesn't have anything to do with the ice cream. So if we can use the first part of our day, right when we wake up, I do breath work right away to wake myself up, but I do gratitude, intention, and meditation to give my body and my mind like this experience of like, the baseline of my experience is utter silence and stillness. And then against that, everything is pretty spectacular and bright and amazing. And like,
or
I'm really present.
Fantastic.
Oh yeah, the one place you want people to connect with you at.
Right. Thank you so much. So what I would encourage people to do is go to skyfirearts.com/mission. And the reason why I think that that's the best place for people to go is because that's where I in the video explain, the mission of SkyFire Arts, that in essence, we're looking to use this spectacular performance where we're literally throwing lightning bolts, and if we have a couple minutes, I want to tell one other story, but where we're actually throwing lightning bolts and we're using that to draw attention to ecological awareness and renewable energy. And I think, if people understand like, oh, there's this spectacular thing, I want to see the spectacular thing in and of itself, but then they also understand, oh, and it's being used to really help humans come back into harmony with nature. I think that they might be inspired to go to skyfirearts.com/subscribe and get our newsletter. Oh. So the bottom line is, like, most people ask me, like, how did you even get into that? Like, how did that even happen for you? And so I was a fire dancer for a couple
right here. It says you got penetrated on a bus.
By every point in time and space, no less. So
it's a lot.
Yeah, I know, right? It's a lot
of different levels.
Yeah. So I was a fire dancer for a couple of years, and I was thinking to myself, God, how I love to spin fire, like the roar, the flame, and the light and the shadow. What would it be like to dance with electricity? It's a primal energy, thrilling, kind of dangerous. Like, what would that be like? And 2 weeks later, I'm standing in line, and the guy standing next to me, Jeff Parisi, starts talking to the woman over the counter about his lightning project. And I'm just like, that is
so F
weird.
off.
Like, yeah, that is so weird. So I'm like listening, and I turned to him. Eventually, I couldn't help myself. I'm like, excuse me, I don't mean to eavesdrop, but I tell my story. And he's like looking at me like, that is really weird that you would think those thoughts and run into me, because I build some of the largest Tesla coils in the world. In fact, I own TeslaCoil.com.
No way.
And then he tells me, not only that, but I have designed a high voltage protective suit in which you can, in fact, dance with and throw lightning bolts. And I'm like, can I get your number? And so that was like the start of this whole journey of my life. And I thank you both so much for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure, talking with you and getting to know you better.
Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, we feel the same way, Michael. Thanks again from my co-host Carol and myself. Thank you all.
That's all for this episode of Titan Evolution Podcast. We hope this no-holds-barred conversation opened your eyes on what it takes to live a genuinely happy life according to your own terms. Now that you've treated yourself to such a refreshing discussion, you cannot listen to nonsense content anymore. Be sure not to miss an episode by subscribing to the show at TitanEvolutionPodcast.com. Don't forget to share the word so more people can be enlightened, informed, and entertained. Thank you for listening.